Now, our last speaker before lunch is Clare Shearman. Claire has an enviable horticultural pedigree. After completing horticultural training, she worked as head of topiary at Hever Castle in Kent. She then moved to the Chelsea Physic Garden before running her own garden design business in Tunbridge Wells. And those of you who have been there will know it's wonderful gardening country. In New Zealand, Claire has worked as head gardener at Government House in Wellington, and then she undertook the restoration of the huge historic garden Fernside at Featherstone. You'll be going there. When you visit on Sunday, you'll begin to appreciate what a challenge she and the owners Rosie and Colin Bevan faced. My question is, will you recognise Claire's hand in the interesting buxus topiary titled Checkmate? 3 years ago, Claire joined the team of the Wellington Botanic Gardens, where she has used her considerable skills as a plant collections manager. Now, allow Claire to whet your appetite as you anticipate visiting two of Claire's gardens, one on Saturday afternoon and the other on Sunday. Please make her welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope I'm not going to spoil it with lots of photographs and then you'd be disappointed by your visit. I doubt it, but I'll try my best not to disturb you for that. So thank you for my introduction. Clare Shearman, that's me. And I was going to introduce you to some old treasures, but also some new secrets. I'd like to just share with you some of my stories working alongside historic gardens throughout my horticultural career. So just a few experiences along the way. So my first step into these experiences would be Hever Castle. How many have you been? Lovely. So you'll recognise this beautiful place, pictured here. And Hever Castle, famous for being Anne Boleyn's family home, that I'm sure quite a few of you have seen. It's nestled in the Kent countryside, and this beautiful place, dating back to the 13th century, was an exciting place to work. Never a dull moment gardening here. This is the lovely team that I worked with, and you can just pick out a very young me. Visitors kept us on our toes by asking us questions such as, I have a camellia and the leaves are yellow. What do I do? What would you recommend? What time of the year would you prune my hydrangeas? And how did you get across to those garden borders, across the moat? And I'd often reply, by boat, just for a laugh. But there were many secret doors within the castle. You quickly learnt how to, looking after a garden, with being an open garden, and how to manage your time, selecting the right jobs at the right time, getting the most done, particularly the noisy work before the gates opened, and all those last-minute tidy-ups that you do before the gates open. And this is the team that I have fond memories of. It makes me choke up even thinking about it, it's funny. We had an eye for detail, and we all specialised in different areas of the garden, and we had, we were quite specialised in our areas. And this is probably where I get the love of neat lines and topiary, and the value of history, and where it all comes from my background. We had a fantastic tool shed, probably high on the list for the oldest tool shed, which was located just inside there. So it's just inside the entrance of the main castle. And I'd often pop out of this door which is located here. Trowel in hand or spade in hand, and just put a smile on some of our visitors' faces as I do so, which is quite fun. The 125-acre garden was laid out between 1904 and 1908, and it was turning marshland into a beautiful design garden that we still see today. The garden areas are managed, that I managed, consisted of an orchard, the castle moat gardens, the rose border, a yew-hedged Tudor garden, which consisted of a herb garden, scented rose garden, knot garden, and of course a maze. And if those of you have been, you've seen the maze too, which was quite fun. You could always imagine the past here. You could always imagine ladies in their Victorian finery taking a turn around the garden. And the best part of the day was early morning, usually about 7 o'clock in the morning. And I had the pleasure of walking up this driveway, the main path, past all the topiaries, and rocking up to the gates with a massive set of keys to the massive set of wooden gates. It was a peaceful and idyllic start to my day, and I treasured those moments, working behind the scenes and capturing the quiet and the beautiful sights, and quite a surreal surrounding. But you have to bear in mind that this is the UK, and the winter mornings, sometimes a bit of a struggle. Frozen fingers, spooky shadows. I never met a ghost, but I did have the shivers quite often. The freezing temperatures also gave us winter jobs to do. The winter mornings, as I say, sometimes a struggle, but we did have the experience of wrapping Italian sculptures in the Italian garden with frost proofing, something possibly that you guys are quite unfamiliar with. And it was a team effort and a fun task, actually. We would grit paths and driveways to keep us safe and de-ice frozen taps. It was a wonderful experience with the team, and in 1995 we won the Garden of the Year award. And again, you can try and spot me on that one. Thanks, Hever, for your experience. Government House Wellington, and this was while renovations took place. This is the Wellington residence of the Governor-General, and this peaceful, beautiful house was built between 1908 and 1910. The grounds cover about 30 acres of exotic and native plants, and it's home to many trees of significance planted by queens, dukes, princes, and governor-generals. At Government House, I learnt how to be a garden fairy. Not necessarily seen, I didn't wear the outfit, by the way, not necessarily seen, but the garden should look immaculate at all times. It was respectful to look at the Governor-General's calendar and timetable of their comings and goings to avoid noise, and doing larger jobs in prominent places of the garden where there weren't meetings going or visitors driving in and out. We ran a tight program of events and lots of officials visiting. And I would often hear from the Governor-General's driver whether they were off schedule. We would take pride in making this north lawn looking as sharp and colourful at all times. And this is the area which you mostly see from the Governor-General's residence area within the house. I was lucky enough to be head gardener there at a really interesting time for Government House, as major renovations took place, as I said. And this was taken about 2011. And it meant that the gardens too were taking some renovation jobs, which we embraced with both arms. And it's our team doing some necessary lawn renovations to make a picture postcard effect. So on the left there, you can see. Thanks for the jingle, by the way. My favourite part of the garden was Convict's Wall. And this is a remnant of the Mount View Lunatic Asylum, which was situated on Government House grounds prior to the construction in 1908. And some additional historic graffiti is also present in the bricks. And it was probably created by the men who were laying it. And bricks are mostly made up of names and pictures. It's quite a peaceful place in the garden with formal structure and a quince espalier along the wall. Working in these special places, you get to see them in different lights. Thank you, Government House, for the experience. And now on to Fernside. Fernside Gardens and implementing new gardens for private historic property. Fernside is located between Featherstone and Greytown, a 25-acre garden that was established in the early 1900s by Mr. and Mrs. Elgar, whose English influence created the structure of the garden that we still see today. The grand house was built in 1924, and that was after a tragic fire destroyed the original arts and crafts property that was there. And Fernside is privately owned. It's a privately owned house and garden, which has a different take on things that a public garden may have. However, some of the long discussions and sleepless nights thinking of the challenges of history versus change, and I'm sure that some of you are very familiar with just those things. As the property had fallen into disrepair, the version of the new owners in 2007 was to retain the arts and crafts style and structure that the featured showed. And this 1934 map was a very useful document, and it made you look back at the glory days. But we also wanted to create some new gardens to enhance the overall journey. So the Mercury Garden. And this is located right by the house, and it's viewed from the upstairs windows of the first, and it's one of the first gardens that you encounter as you walk through from the courtyard. This is an early 1920s photograph of Mr. and Mrs. Elgar and their beautiful dog. And the beautiful dog features quite a lot in their photographs, I have to say. As often happens in time, things change, they get lost, gardens come and go, features crumble or sold when times are hard. And with the wonderful pictorial evidence that Fernside holds, it was a joy to design and implement new gardens and also bring gardens back to life. And this is the same place, as you can see. I just flick back. Shall I just flick back? Hang on. Ta-da, ta-da. And this was taken in 2012. After much debate and plans, many plans, we decided on this, to reinstate this garden structure and its form, along with the statue of Mercury that had long been lost, but to enhance the overall formal element with buxus hedging and roses instead of the perennials that we could see in the photograph. We also, We also instead, wrong one, sorry. We also popped in this hedge here, and this hedge across there, just to kind of divide the garden a little bit more, so that it was a little bit more secret as you came in, and it made a sort of a garden room. And this is our great delight in popping in the lines before we start digging out. And that's what you see now. And this is from above. And it's really interesting also when you're implementing new gardens to look from all angles of which they may be viewed. So here we have the 1924 photograph, the 2007, and then the 2013. The secret garden. And that's located just here. Okay. So you may think that this one is an old photograph. We had an untouched space behind a beautiful Victorian wall with an opening in the wall. And this really was crying out to be a secret garden. It was just a meadow in 2007, and that's the beautiful Victorian wall, and a cute little, we used it as a pump house. It provides the pump system for the gardens from the water race, but we believe that it would have been like a little changing hut because we have pictures of some ladies in their swimwear, 1920s swimwear, sitting by a little pool that's nestled behind this wall. Again, after long discussions, many designs, all with a similar brief of needing to keep the feel of the arts and crafts style and to fit the gardens as a whole, yet creating a separate secret garden and making use of the entrance in the wall. We planted 3 successions of lupins to improve the soil, which I have to say worked wonders. So this is the lupins here. We dug them in 3 times. So planting 3 and dug them in 3 times. And the lush planting that occurred after that was amazing. This is during our journey of planting and implementing, and you can see the before and the after. Hopefully you can pick that out. I'm just going to throw some pretty pictures up here now of some plants. This is one of my favourites actually, the Camasias. Absolutely adore those. Delphiniums and salvias. And entering through this space, there's an archway, or many an arch, with creating like a tunnel effect. And we planted 2 different malus on this, one which was Jack Hum, and the other one was Takapuna. And it gives you a succession of fruit, and then obviously different flowers as well. So that worked really well. And the arts and crafts style, as you can see here, it has a structure, and then we have planting to form that structure, but then within that you've got the loose kind of cottage garden style within that. So within this space you see many a different things you've seen that you're taken on a journey throughout the garden, and then there's structure within the planting, and I think that my love of topiary came into effect here with creating topiary within those garden spaces, so that as you kind of turned a corner you'd come across something else with some form of structure. So I think that's what I liked about this arts and crafts style. Okay, the sunken garden. And that's located just there. If you're getting your bearings, this is the house here. This is the courtyard where you enter, and this is the Mercury Garden. I have to stop myself calling it Freddie's Garden, because a little secret is that as gardeners we call it Freddie's Garden because it's the Mercury statue in it. So yeah, I have to stumble across Freddie's Garden here. And then the secret garden's way over here. And just to tell you a little bit more, because you're going to have a journey through this garden, is to go all the way up to the lake up here, and then all the way back down this beautiful real garden. And this is all the Victorian structure running right through the garden. And the lake was hand dug, which is quite amazing, that to think back in the day you would do such a thing. And then the secret garden here. I'm going off tack now, I knew I would. So we're going to come through here into the sunken garden here. And so pictured here, the sunken garden, and this is 1954 when Fernside was owned by the American Embassy. We can see lots of the American Embassy time within Fernside. When you go, you'll see some concrete structures, and that would be that appropriate time for when they were there. However, the stonework structure would have belonged to the original arts and crafts house, this one here in the sunken garden, and it was believed to have been a rose garden. But again, as we know, time changes the landscape and the plantings, and then once were small trees become large trees, and here we wanted to create something that was right for the space now, but retain the original feature stonework. So the area was dappled shade with the now large trees, and it was quite a damp area due to the sunken garden structure. So it was really no good for roses. However, we decided on something like this. So again, after many a design, we settled for a lost garden with tree ferns and big foliage textures, but we couldn't really call it the lost garden because it was right by the house. So we settled for the forgotten garden. It's just the forgotten garden. Okay. The chess set. And that is located just there. So there's the sunken garden, and you come through and out to this lawn area here. This was really an opportunity for us to do something fun, quirky, and new in a space of lawn on the west side of the house, creating a garden as a transition, really, between the forgotten garden and the main lawn. And this is Fool's Mate, if anybody is a chess player. Anyone? No? So the idea here is that the next move will be checkmate. So when you go, you can have a play with that. They don't move, by the way, they are planted. We did have a debate. The owner did want them in pots, and I said, no, 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 no. So I'll just look at a few more secrets within Fernside. This is a rhododendron delivery. Just a few little ones. And this was creating a rhododendron walk along the lakeside paths. So with a before here and an after. I'm not going to point at that, you should know what you're looking at. And some fun times in the rain, planting these massive rhododendrons, and my lovely colleague there, all in his gear, and me trying to take a photo in the rain. This is dredging the lake and implementing a natural water filter using oi. And this is just some beautiful pictures of Fernside. Thanks, Fernside, for the experience. So where I am now. Now I currently work for Wellington Gardens as plant collection team manager, and I look after the plant collections. Planting for the future, but looking after the past. And I look after the 3 gardens, Bolton Street Cemetery, Truby King Park, and Wellington Botanic Garden. So at Wellington Botanic Garden, we've just been celebrating 150 years of the garden, which is a wonderful part to be of. And we've taken we started this back in March, and this is the floral bedding then. And these are still there, these cakes that we put in. You can't have pieced, by the way. And this was taken a few weeks ago in the tulip display. So working in these places with huge history makes you feel very proud to be a really, really small part, a snippet in their time. And they will share many new stories to come, I'm sure. Thanks for listening.
Well, now's your opportunity to ask Claire about what she does and how she does it. But my first question to Claire is Fossil aluminium the best thing to treat box blight, or is there something better? I bought 100 grams of it when I was here in Wellington in February, wondering whether it would be taken from me when I went back into Sydney, and I found I could buy it in Australia, and I bought a kilogram for the same quantity. Have I thrown my money away?
There's all sorts of products out there, but copper's a good one. Yeah, copper. Yeah.
Okay. Questions?
No one?
How deep is the lake at Fernside?
Oh, golly. It's about here. And it's full of silts and many eels. And some big ones too. I have to say, on the quiet, one of my colleagues did swim in the lake when it was really, really hot, because it does get really hot over in the Wairarapa. And so we had a little dip. Well, my colleagues did anyway. And there was this massive eel. As I was dipping my toes in, I was like, no, I'm not going in there.
I have a question, Claire. I liked your pause when you said you deliberated very carefully before you discerned the scheme you were put in, but you haven't mentioned a single previous garden designer or previous gardeners. Are there any authors of Burnside that you looked at in terms of previous schemes?
No, other than the extensive pictorial evidence that we have of Fernside, and that was in Mr. and Mrs. Elgar's time, and they own that property from the late 1800s through to 1930s. And they were the ones really to create the structure in the garden. Mrs. Elgar was a great socialite, so and they travelled with their English background, but they travelled through Europe, and they often came back with bits and pieces, and you'll see those massive trees that they're there from them. So other than that, no, I relied on my design background to come up with something. Yeah.
I was just wondering about the hedges at Fernside,
Yeah.
apart from the buxus.
Hedges, we have a yew hedge there, and then other than that, we've implemented carokia. Yeah, but we have suffered with buxus blight over there as well, but give it a good feed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the garden at Hever is an Edwardian creation, isn't it? Hever Castle?
Pardon?
Edwardian, first decade of the 20th century. The
No,
layout.
it's Victorian. Really, most of the layout
Right.
that you see there
And
is.
who was the author of that, the designer?
Oh,
Not known.
no, you put me on the spot. I'd have to look.
Right.
Sorry.
Claire, can you tell us what's special, I think special, about the lake at Fernside? What one of its claims to fame?
Its claim to fame is that it was a Lord of the Rings setting. Is that what you mean, Lynn? It was one of the Lord of the Rings settings. And another little behind the scenes, at Fernside we do get an awful lot of visitors dressed up and reenacting the Lord of the Rings trilogy right by the lake, fighting over the ring. So there was a few film locations around the lake that were set there, and the bridge over the lake is the famous bridge. It doesn't look like it, but it is. It is that. Anything else? Do you want one more?
Many stately homes in Europe have vegetable gardens and orchards, and I note from your talks, there was no mention of that at all at Fernside.
No, there has not been pictorial evidence that we have found for that. I have a gut feeling that the area where we created the secret garden may well have been something of that, but that's just me imagining that that's where you'd put it. Behind a wall like that would be the location that one would expect to see something like that from other European and English estates, such as. But there has been we have no evidence of that. No. Okay, thank you.
Please join me in thanking Claire.